Hello, welcome to the First Gen Money YouTube channel where we talk about money, life, mental health, all things from a first gen experience. Today is the first video in the wedding series. The wedding series is a series I hope to continue after this first video where I just walk you through the process of planning my wedding, of planning our wedding, of whether I decide to get a dress or not, how we decide to pay for this, well, how we determine how we're gonna pay for this. I'll just be updating you on how I've been feeling about the wedding industry. Now, if you are interested to hear about the First Gen community members, AKA yourselves, I have interviewed 7 First Gen Money community members about their weddings. And I will be posting those interviews on the Amigas Get Money podcast. So if you haven't yet, make sure that you subscribe to that podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. So that'll be the interview series. We're gonna be speaking to them about their experiences, and this wedding series is gonna be from my perspective. Okay, so a little reminder for those who are new here, I got engaged on October 8th, 2022 to my partner of 7.5 years. Yeah, since then we've been getting a lot of questions like how is the wedding planning going, all that stuff. I mean, at least I have. Ari, how many times have you been asked how the wedding planning is going?
A few times. So
Ari's been asked too, which is kind of a nice surprise because I feel like usually only the women get asked this question, but I guess people are asking Ari too. On a serious note, I wanted to make this video and just have a series of getting ready for the wedding, just to let you know like what's happening, how are we going about planning a wedding, what are we thinking about in this process. Since being engaged, I have gone into full research mode in more ways than one. So first way was talking to other people who've gotten married. Talking to other people, asking what they did, how they prioritized different things, how they paid for their wedding, what mattered to them, to just like hear it from other people. And that is what became the Amigas Get Money interview series that is coming out, because I just felt like I needed to talk to everybody who had been on this boat before. The second kind of research that I did, and this is something that I did before I got engaged too, I started getting quotes. I started looking at venues, getting quotes, getting an understanding of what it looks like to get married. What are the things that you pay for? What are those prices? What places tend to be more expensive? So I've been getting quotes left and right, even though sometimes I get quotes from places that I know that I'm like not too fond of, but I'm just curious. So I've been getting quotes. And then another thing we've been doing is Ari and I have been having conversations about what kind of wedding we want. Something that came out of the interviews that I did was just this understanding that like you and your partner need to talk about the things that you value, right? Like what do you want to prioritize? So Ari and I have been talking about like what do we care about? What kind of wedding do we want to have? What experience do we want to have planning the wedding and on the wedding day? So like getting clear as to like what is it that we want. And finally, the other thing that I've been doing that I think has been the most like research that I can do is also thinking critically about why we have weddings. And I don't just mean like Ari and I and people that we know, but like as a culture, like what does that mean? Why the big weddings? Why the white weddings? What is going on here? Who in society started this trend? And part of what like sparks this is like being at a wedding, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were just like, weddings take a lot of planning, take a lot of organizing, and who does that usually fall on, right? Like we know that like the emotional labor is something that women hold most of the time in heterosexual relationships. When it comes time to plan a wedding, who does that responsibility fall on? And so thinking critically about who is benefiting from this industry, which is a very profitable industry, let me remind you. What is the incentive for it to stay the way that it is, right? As expensive as it is. And while I was reading some of these articles that a friend of mine shared, I was trying to think critically about why I want a wedding. Why do I feel like in order to express our love and show our love with our friends and family, our closest friends and family, that I need to host this big party. And why do I need to wear this white dress? What does all of this mean? Why can't we just have a party and do that? And we could. And so I think it was like also just like trying to think about things differently and challenge my thought process. Like, oh, well, if I don't have that, you know, big wedding and like walk down the aisle, then like maybe it says something about my relationship. So I've been doing a lot of, maybe the word isn't research, but I've been doing a lot of thinking. I've been doing a lot of thinking, especially on this part, because it definitely informs what we're gonna wanna do, what kind of wedding we're gonna have, what kind of experience we're gonna have. And I think it has. I think we definitely obviously know we wanna have a wedding, don't necessarily like need to do all that goes along with planning a big wedding. And after 3 months of thinking about all of this and just like having the space to really like sit there and not be in the planning mode, I realized a couple things. So number one, the wedding industry is a scam. Not a scam in that like you're not getting your money's worth. No, of course, like you get the services you pay for. It's all marketing, right? Like the need to have this or that or whatever it is. You choose your wedding tradition and put it there. Because I feel like it is a profitable one, right? Like in 2022, the wedding industry is a market size of almost $58 billion. That's a lot of money. When I say that weddings are a scam, I don't mean weddings. I mean the wedding industry, the people who put these ideas that this is the one day of your life that you are going to matter. It's not. And so I think when we tie it all back to like, this is the best day of her life. Oh my God. Of course the dress is gonna matter. Of course I want all of my loved ones to be there. I mean, when else are all your loved ones there? Usually at a funeral. Like, you know, it's like your wedding, your funeral, nothing in between. And I guess the next thing I realize is I want a wedding. So yeah, even if I think that this is a billion-dollar industry that is really great at marketing things to us, I still want to have a wedding. I still want to have a wedding. We're allowed to want to have weddings. That's another thing that I was like grappling with. It's like, well, if I believe these things, like maybe I should just not have a wedding. How radical would that be? Let's be real. I want a wedding because I want to have a party. I want to celebrate my relationship. I realized those two things, that you can believe that there's fundamentally something that needs to like, not necessarily change, it's not gonna change, but like there's something that's being done to make us believe that this is a day that we should be okay spending $30K plus on. We can know that and we could still want a wedding. Those two are not mutually exclusive. This is where we are in terms of the wedding planning, how we are feeling 3 months after our engagement, where we are. So number one, the emotional labor of planning a wedding is real. And just a refresher of what emotional labor is, I will put a definition here, but it is basically all the unseen work that is typically, of course, this is us talking about a heterosexual normative relationship that is taken on, a burden that is taken on by the woman. So these are things that you don't necessarily see as work. Like, do we remember to get birthday gifts? Should we go see somebody's kid who was just born? Things like that. All of that is emotional labor that is usually on the onus of the women in the heterosexual relationship. There's a lot of emotional labor that goes into planning a wedding, just like there is in managing a household. In the last 3 months, I noticed myself being the one that was always emailing people about quotes, looking up venues, and doing all the work for this wedding that we are going to have together as a couple. It felt like Ari wasn't interested or didn't care to help out in this process of planning a wedding. I don't completely blame Ari for not being involved because I never really asked for his help. I think I just kind of assumed like he's gonna be interested in doing it, so he'll come to me, or I assumed like I had to do it. But also, I don't blame him because he was planning an engagement party for us for like 3 months. And so when we got engaged, Ari was like, okay, finally I can breathe and not have to plan anything because I just spent all these months planning and trying to surprise Danielle for this engagement party for 50 plus people. Like, he actually planned a mini wedding for us. And he's sitting right next to me, so I'm sorry if at moments I'm sure you're like, what is she about to say? Like, it's not that I didn't want to help. I know you didn't want to help. I think what I'm saying is like, we weren't communicating, right? So I felt like I was the only one who cared about this wedding that we were now supposed to plan, but only because we didn't talk about it. And Ari had just finished planning a mini wedding, our engagement party. So I have decided, and I'm sure we've talked about it, that we're not going to do any extensive planning right now. At least I'm not going to do any planning if it just feels like it's me who's doing the planning, and I'm okay with that. I don't want to be the only one that's searching things and doing all the emails. Ari has started to reach out to a few venues, but at the end of the day, I don't want to resent my partner in this process. And so I'm not going to do any of the concerted effort in figuring out our wedding until we're both in a place to figure it out together, which I think is a fair thing to do.
Definitely need to communicate with each other to ensure that we have the same expectations. Obviously, this isn't just your wedding, it's our wedding.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
I think, like, obviously that falls on, that's my fault.
Part of this, and I think this communication of like, how do we divide the labor of planning a wedding is something I go into in one of the podcast episodes that is coming out. So make sure that you follow along in the Amigas Get Money podcast, because I'm interviewing different Latinas and different community members about their wedding experience. And some of them talked about like that division of labor and who was in charge of what and like how it felt. We definitely go into that with like other people's experiences, but that was just ours. Number 2 of kind of where we are right now, we want a wedding. That we know for sure. We definitely want a wedding, but we also want other things. Although we want to have a wedding and we're not actively planning for one right now, it doesn't mean that like we don't want one. We do, and we're gonna get married. That's gonna happen, but we're okay if it's one that we don't spend a lot of money on, because that is our biggest goal. I think we also have other money goals like buying a house in the near future that we want to be able to save for. There's different and not competing goals, but in a way competing, because at the end of the day, you only have so much money to be able to save for. So if you're saving for retirement and you're saving for a home and you're saving, like, there's got to be a distribution here that makes sense. Yes, we want to have a wedding, and that's how we feel very certain about us wanting to have a wedding. Is it going to be small? I don't know. Is it going to be big? Probably not. Most likely going to be small, but we know we want to have some kind of celebration of our love. So I think number 2 is like, we want to get married, but we also have other life priorities that we want to consider. And so maybe spending so much effort and time planning and paying for a wedding is not top of our priority right now. Number 3, and what I think is the most important, is that we're prioritizing our relationship and making sure that, yes, you know, in this engagement period that we're figuring out if, you know, how this wedding is going to happen in our budget, but we're also prioritizing like strengthening our relationship. Of course, you can do both at the same time. I'm not saying like if you're planning a wedding, you're not prioritizing your relationship. I'm not saying that. I'm saying for us, we are prioritizing the how do we strengthen the relationship aspect. The wedding is like, we'll think about that, but it's not going to be the main thing that we work on in our relationship. There's other things happening at the same time, other goals that we're working on that are not at all related to each other, but that is kind of our couple goal. And so that's where we are. I think number 3 is the most important. We want to have a wedding, but we also want to make sure that our relationship is the strongest it can be, so that we are celebrating the actual love and work that we put into our relationship on the day we get married. So I don't know what that wedding looks like right now. We don't know exactly what it's gonna be, and I'll be sharing all the updates along the way, but that's how we're thinking about it right now. There you have it. That's what's been happening here on this side of the house the last 3 months since being engaged. I hope you enjoyed the first video in the First Gen Money wedding series. It's a series because I know for sure there's gonna be more than one video because we're gonna plan a wedding. We're gonna plan a wedding. So follow along, join me. If you don't yet already subscribe to this YouTube channel, go check out the interviews I did with the First Gen Money community and hear about other people and their wedding experience. So I will see you next time. Bye.